Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Gentleman Psychic. I am going to be talking both to you and to you, two cameras, because I don't have Restream and I use it for my other Scared and Alone show, but I don't have that for here. So, Merlin and the Fey Kings, hello, welcome. Fey Kings Crown, welcome. Um, I'm so excited to read to you some classic Victorian tales. I know we've got over here, we've got Merlin, and we've got Tara on the other side. Christy Cragen, hello. Barbara J. King, hello. Chrissy Blasco, hello. Thank you, dear. Mary Jane King, good evening. So, again, I am looking at two cameras. I've got one here and I've got one here because I'm not using the other app. I'm not using it because it's kind of expensive and I have not. Amy, good to see you too. Hello, Barbara J. King. Good to see you. Eula Green. I'm sorry. I hope I said that. I hope I said your name correctly. I'm sorry. Matthew, hello. Good evening. Good to see you too. Okay. Well, tonight I'm so excited. Thank you, Matthew. I'm so excited to bring to you uh, At the Back of the North Wind. It is a book that was given to me from a very dear friend. Good evening, sweet Ciara. Good evening. Gracious good evening, John Maxwell. Christy Cragen went Halloween shopping. Yulia, I've been on, but I've also uh, I've been on, but I've been banned on Facebook because people get sensitive over issues, and they have learned to hit that ban button. But that's why my feed has been lower in the value on Facebook. Yes. Anyway, that's what happens. I was banned on Facebook. I'm not anymore, but I was banned on Facebook. Um, Apparently, they like to say things against people who are like me, but if you say anything against them for their faith or anything that can be misconstrued as being that, then they will click that report button. And if once you get reported, then anyway, it becomes a mess. But I'm here and I am so glad that you are here with me. Happy Friday, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, boils and ghouls, and those who remain undecided. My clock did not go off this evening. I think the clock has stopped, and that's okay because I have a timer right over here on this camera. Michael Chadwick is watching. Michael, hello. I hope you're doing okay. I'm doing very well, everybody. So I really like everyone to join me on my YouTube because it means more clicks. It means more attention for me. But that's okay. If you are on my Facebook, it is fine. Oh, wait a minute. I heard the clock tick. Maybe it's just behind. Anyway, so we'll be reading. Those of you who have been following me on my social media know that I am a competitor in the Face of Horror. So the link will be in the comments below, both here on YouTube and there on Facebook. You'll see it on social media. It'll be everywhere. So go and vote for me, Richard Lale Lillard, the Gentleman Psychic, and I would love to be voted for. I would love for you to vote for me. Good evening, Jessica Campbell. Good evening, Anthony Cipriano. Tonight we're going to be reading. Thank you, Sean. I so appreciate that. Keep voting. Keep the voting up. Keep the voting up. Did my clock stop? I think it's still ticking, but I think it hasn't been wound, and so it's just a few minutes late. But it's still ticking. It's just it hasn't been wound. So it'll probably go off here in the next 2 minutes, but that's okay. We'll let the clock do its thing. We are going to do our thing. Thank you, Tara. I appreciate that so much. All right, my lovelies, I guess without further ado, I hope that you settle in, that you are ready for us to explore this lovely children's story. After the last book, it was a brilliant story. It was a great story, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, but it was very technical and there were a lot of Latin words and it was very educated. Sean says, can you wish my wife, Susie, a happy birthday? It's tomorrow. Susie, happy birthday. I'll look in this camera and then in this camera. Susie, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Some announcements. I guess I should go ahead and tell you some announcements. I will be traveling in October. October is going to be very busy for me. I'll be a little bit in Pennsylvania and Ohio. I'll be a little bit in upstate New York at the Paracon in Plattsburgh, New York, and I will be in Los Angeles briefly. So I'll be around, and that's why coming October, it might be a little bit difficult for me to read to you, but I will. Yes, Ohio, briefly in Ohio. Long story short, yes, I'll be briefly there. I'm actually going back to Los Angeles to visit some friends. That's what I'm going for. Here comes my clock. We'll let the clock go. So where in Ohio? It's right next to the Pennsylvania border. So that's where I will be for a few days in October. And thank you very much, Bobby. Appreciate that. So yeah, I'll be traveling, so I'll be hard to reach. But if you do come to the Plattsburgh Paracon, that would be great. If you want to message me, if any of those cities ring a bell to you and you want to meet me, you can definitely send me a private message, and I will be there. Well, you can come and see me. I'll be staying with friends. I'll be there's a lot of things that I have planned. But you can come and see me when I'm there. Private message me, and then we'll make up a time. Lovely. Haven't been able to catch you in a long time, Amy. Well, thank you so much. You see, I stopped doing my story time on Facebook because I get better hits on YouTube, which is this camera here. But then I realized that I'm missing a whole bunch of my audience, and I have not paid for Restream, which my producers have done for Scared and Alone. So when it's on Scared and Alone, it's on both. It's actually here. But anyway, I haven't paid for it because I just haven't, and I need to. But I get more clicks on my YouTube, longer clicks. It lasts longer. So I have this. I'm just doing this today. How are the boys? They're doing fine. They're upstairs. They're fine. They're itching to be doing a show again. I promise I will get back to it when things have become a little bit more even for me. Then I will start doing those videos again. Sweet Ciara says, I haven't been tuning in lately due to the hectic schedule, but it feels great to be back. I am so glad you're here. So Jess, I am going to be near Youngstown, Ohio. Near Youngstown. Not exactly there. I have a little bit in Pennsylvania I'll be visiting, and I have a little bit in Youngstown I'll be visiting. And so private message me. I most of the time is going to be spent visiting my friends in that area. But if there is time, I will be doing readings there in Ohio. So message me, and you can come and meet me in person, and I will sign pictures, autographs for you, and I'll be doing readings. So card readings. So I'll bring my cards, and it'll be fun. For Halloween, I will be in Los Angeles. I have an event that I'm attending. It's a private event, but I have an event. And thank you. I will vote after this. Thank you. Yes, go after. You can vote at any time. Every day you can vote on Face of Horror. Vote every day that you can. It is through. I've made it through the first round because of the people that I love. All of you. It's so lovely. BB, I will be in Los Angeles. And I love, Nicholas says I should move to the UK. I love England. I love the UK. I miss the UK. I miss it. I was there for some time, and I do absolutely miss it. And besides, on a sad note, now that Her Majesty is no longer among us, it would be nice for England to have another queen, you know? I'm only joking. Anyway, yes, it would be very nice to say hello to you too. And all right. Well, with that, my loves, it is now 10:09. Do you know where your children are? That's an old thing. Without further ado, my sweet loves, I present to you At the Back of the North Wind. Chapter 1. I have been asked to tell you about the back of the North Wind. An old Greek writer once mentions a people who lived there and were so comfortable that they could not bear it any longer and drowned themselves. My story is not the same as his. I do not think Herodotus had got the right account of the place. I am going to tell you how it fared with a boy who went there. He lived in a low room over a coach house, and that was not by any means at the back of the North Wind, as his mother very well knew. For one side of the room was built only of boards, and the boards were so old that you might run a penknife through into the North Wind, and then let them settle between them, which was the sharper. I know that when you pulled it out again, the wind would be after it like a cat after a mouse, and you would know soon enough you were not at the back of the North Wind. Still, this room was not very cold, except when the north wind blew stronger than usual. The room I have to do with now was always cold, except in summer. Then the sun took the matter into his own hands. Indeed, I am not sure whether I ought to call it a room at all, for it was just a loft where they kept hay and straw and oats for the horses. And when Little Diamond, but stop, I must tell you that his father, who was a coachman, had named him after a favorite horse, and his mother had no objection. When Little Diamond then lay there in bed, he could hear the horses under him munching away in the dark, or moving sleepily in their dreams. For Diamond's father had built him a bed in the loft with boards around it, because they had so little room in their own end over the coach house. Diamond's father put old Diamond in the stall under the bed, because he was a quiet horse and did not go to sleep standing up, but lay down like a reasonable creature. But although he was surprisingly reasonable creature, yet when young Diamond woke in the middle of the night and felt the bed shaking in the blasts of the north wind, he could not help wondering whether, if the wind blow the house down and he were to fall into the manger, old Diamond mightn't eat him up before he knew him in his nightgown. And although old Diamond was very quiet all night long, yet when he woke, he got up like an earthquake, and then young Diamond knew what o'clock it was, or at least what was to be done next, which was to go to sleep again as fast as he could. There was hay at his feet, and hay at his bed, piled up in great trusses to the very roof. Indeed, it was sometimes only through a little lane with several turnings, which looked as if it had been sawn out for him, that he could reach his bed at all. For the stock of hay was, of course, always in a state either of slow ebb or sudden flow. Sometimes the whole space of the loft, with little panes in the roof for the stars to look in, would lie open before his open eyes as he lay in bed. Sometimes a yellow wall of sweet-smelling fibers closed up his view at the distance of half a yard. Sometimes, when his mother had undressed him in her room and told him to trot away to bed by himself, he would creep into the heart of the hay and lie there thinking how cold it was outside in the wind, and how warm it was inside there in his bed, and how he could go to it when he pleased, only he wouldn't just yet. He would get a little colder first, and ever as he grew colder, his bed would grow warmer, till at last he would scramble out of the hay, shoot like an arrow into his bed, cover himself up, and snuggle down, thinking what a happy boy he was. He had not the least idea that the wind got in a chink in the wall and blew him all night, for the back of his bed was only of boards an inch thick, and on the other side of them was the north wind. Now, as I have already said, these boards were soft and crumbly. To be sure, they were tarred on the outside, yet in many places they were more like tinder than timber. Hence, it happened that the soft part having worn away from about it, little Diamond found one night, after he lay down, that a knot had come out of one of them, and that the wind was blowing in upon him in cold and rather imperious fashion. Now he had no fancy for leaving things wrong that might be set right, so he jumped out of bed again, got a little strike of hay, twisted it up, folded it in the middle, and, having thus made it into a cork, stuck it into the hole in the wall. But the wind began to blow loud and angry, and as Diamond was falling asleep, out blew his cork and hit him on the nose, just hard enough to wake him up, quite, and let him hear the wind whistling shrill in the hole. He searched for his hay cork, found it, stuck it in harder, and was just dropping off once more when pop! With an angry whistle behind it, the cork struck him again, this time on the cheek. Up he rose once more, made a fresh stopple of hay, and corked the hole severely. But he was hardly down again before pop! It came out on his forehead. He gave up, drew the clothes above his head, and was soon fast asleep. Although next day was very stormy, Diamond forgot all about the hole, for he was busy making a cave by the side of his mother's fire with a broken chair, a three-legged stool, and a blanket. And then sitting in it, his mother, however, discovered it and pasted a bit of brown paper over it, so that when Diamond had snuggled down the next night, he had no occasion to think of it. Presently, however, he lifted his head and listened. Who could that be talking to him? The wind was rising again, and getting very loud and full of rushes and whistles. He was sure someone was talking, and very near him too it was. But he was not frightened, for he had not yet learned how to be. So he sat up and hearkened. At last the voice, which, though quite gentle, sounded a little angry, appeared to come from the back of the bed. He crept nearer to it, and laid his ear against the wall. Then he heard nothing but the wind, which sounded very loud indeed. The moment, however, that he moved his head from the wall, he heard the voice again, close to his ear. He felt about with his hand and came upon a piece of paper his mother had pasted over the hole. Against this he laid his ear, and then he heard the voice quite distinctly. There was, in fact, a little corner of paper loose, and through that, as from a mouth in the wall, the voice came. "What do you mean, little boy, closing up my window?" "What window?" asked Diamond. "You stuffed hay into it 3 times last night. I had to blow it out again 3 times." "You can't mean this little hole. It isn't a window. It's a hole in my bed." "I did not say it was a window. I said it was my window. But it can't be a window because windows are holes to see out of." "Well, that's just what I made this window for." "But you are outside. You can't want a window." "You are quite mistaken. Windows are to see out of. You say, 'Well, I'm in my house, and I want windows to see out of it.' But you've made a window into my bed. Well, your mother has got 3 windows into my dancing room, and you have 3 windows into my garret." "But I heard father say when my mother wanted to make him a window through the wall, it was against the law, for it would look out into Mr. Divy's garden." The voice laughed. "The law would have some trouble to catch me," it said. "But if it's not right, you know," said Diamond, "that's no matter. You shouldn't do it." "I'm so tall, I am above that law," said the voice. "You must have a tall house, then," said Diamond. "Yes, a tall house. The clouds are inside it." "Dear me," said Diamond, and thought a minute. I think then you can hardly expect me to keep a window in my bed for you. Why don't you make a window into Mr. Divey's bed? Nobody makes a window into an ash pit, said the voice, rather sadly. I like to see nice things out of my windows. But he must have a nicer bed than I have, though mine is very nice, so nice that I couldn't wish a better. It's not the bed I care about, it's what's in it. But you just open that window. Well, mother says I shouldn't be disobliging, but it's rather hard. You see, the north wind will blow right in my face if I do. I am the north wind. Oh, said Diamond thoughtfully. Then will you promise not to blow on my face if I open your window? Hmm, I can't promise that. But you'll give me a toothache. Mother got it already. But what's to become of me without a window? Oh, I'm sure I don't know. All I say is, it will be worse for me than for you. No, it will not. You shall not be the worse for it. I promise you that. You will be better the better for it. Much better. Just you believe what I say and do as I tell you. Well, I can pull clothes over my head, said Diamond, and, feeling with his little sharp nails, he got a hold of the open edge of the paper and tore it off at once. In came a long whistling spear of cold, and struck his little naked chest. He scrambled and tumbled in under the bedclothes and covered himself up. There was no paper now between him and the voice, and he felt a little, not frightened exactly. I told you he had not learned that yet, but rather queer. For what strange person this North Wind must be that lived in the great house called Out of Doors. I suppose, thought Diamond, and made windows into people's beds, but this voice began again, and he could hear it quite plainly, even with his head under the bedclothes. It was still a more gentle voice now, although 6 times as large and loud as it had been, and he thought it sounded a little like his mother. What's your name, little boy? It asked. Diamond, answered Diamond, under the bedclothes. What a funny name. It's a very nice name, returned its owner. I don't know that, said the voice. Well, I do, retorted Diamond, a little rudely. Do you know to whom you are speaking? No, said Diamond, and indeed he did not. For to know a person's name is not always to know the person's self. Then I must not be angry with you. You had better look and see, though. Diamond is a very pretty name, persisted the boy, vexed that it should not give satisfaction. Diamond is useless thing, rather, said the voice. That's not true. Diamond is very nice, as big as two, and so quiet all night. And doesn't he make a jolly row in the morning, getting up on 4 great legs? It's like thunder. You don't seem to know what a diamond is. Oh, I don't. I just Diamond is a great and good horse, and he sleeps right under me. He is Old Diamond, and I am Young Diamond, or if you like it better, for you're very particular, Mr. North Wind. He's Big Diamond, and I'm Little Diamond, and I don't know which of us father likes best. A beautiful laugh, large but very soft and musical, sounded somewhere beside him, and Diamond kept his head under the clothes. I'm not the North Wind, said the voice. You told me that you were the North Wind, insisted Diamond. I did not say Mr. North Wind, said the voice. Well, then, I do, for mother tells me I ought to be polite. Then let me tell you, I don't think it all polite of you to say Mr. to me. Well, I didn't know better. I'm very sorry. But you ought to have known better. I don't know that. I do. You can't say it's polite to lie there talking with your head under the bedclothes and never look up and see what kind of person you're talking to. I want you to come out with me. I want to go to sleep, said Diamond, very nearly crying, for he did not like to be scolded, even when he deserved it. You shall sleep all the better tomorrow night. Besides, said Diamond, you are out in Mr. Devise's garden, and I can't get there. I can only get into our own yard. Will you take your head out of the bedclothes? Said the voice, just a little angrily. No, answered Diamond, half peevish, half frightened. The instant he said the word, a tremendous blast of wind crashed in a board of the wall and swept the clothes off Diamond. He started up in terror. Leaning over him was a large, beautiful, pale face of a woman. Her dark eyes looked a little angry, for they had just begun to flash, but a quivering in her sweet upper lip made her look as if she were going to cry. What was most strange was that away from her head streamed out her black hair in every direction, so that the darkness in the hayloft looked as if it were made of her hair. But as Diamond gazed at her in speechless amazement, mingled with confidence, for the boy was entranced with her mighty beauty, her hair began to gather itself out of the darkness and fell down all about her, till her face looked out of the midst of it like a moon out of a cloud. From her eyes came all the light by which Diamond saw her face and her hair, and that was all he did see of her yet. That's all he did see of her yet. The wind was over and gone. Will you go with me now, you little Diamond? I'm sorry I was forced to be rough with you, said the lady. I will, yes, I will, answered Diamond, holding out both his arms. But, he added, dropping them, how shall I get my clothes? They are in my mother's room, and the door is locked. Oh, never mind your clothes. You will not be cold. I shall take care of that. Nobody is cold with the north wind. I thought everybody was, said Diamond. That is a great mistake. Most people make it, however. They are cold because they are not with the north wind, but without it. If Diamond had been a little older, and had supposed himself a good deal wiser, he would have thought the lady was joking. But he was not older, and did not fancy himself wiser, and therefore understood her well enough. Again he stretched out his arms. The lady's face drew back a little. Follow me, Diamond, she said. Yes, said Diamond, only a little ruefully. You're not afraid, said the North Wind. No, ma'am, but mother never would let me go without shoes. She never said anything about clothes, so I dare say she wouldn't mind that. I know your mother very well, said the lady. She's a good woman. I have visited her often. I was with her when you were born. I saw her laugh and cry both at once. I love your mother, Diamond. How was it you did not know my name then, ma'am? Please, say to, I, please, am I to say ma'am to you, ma'am? One question at a time, dear boy. I knew your name quite well, but I wanted to hear what you would say for it. Don't you remember that day when the man was finding fault with your name, how I blew the wind in? Yes, yes, answered Diamond eagerly. Our window opens like a door right after the coach house. And the wind, you, ma'am, came in and blew the Bible out of the Bible's hands, and the leaves went all flutter on the floor, and my mother picked it up and gave it back to him, and there was your name in the Bible, the sixth stone in the high priest's breastplate. Oh, a stone, was it? Said Diamond. I thought it would have been a horse, I did. Never mind. A horse is better than a stone any day. Well, you see, I know all about you and your mother. Yes, I will go with you now. Now, for the next question. You are not to call me ma'am. You must call me just my own name, respectfully. You know, just North Wind. Well, please, North Wind, you are so beautiful. I am quite ready to go with you. You must not be ready to go with everything beautiful all at once, Diamond. But what's beautiful can't be bad. You're not bad, North Wind. No, I'm not bad, but sometimes beautiful things grow bad by doing bad, and it takes some time for the badness to spoil their beauty. So, little boy may be mistaken if they go after things because they are beautiful. Well, I will go with you because you are beautiful and good too. Ah, but there's another thing, Diamond. What if I should look ugly without being bad? Look ugly myself because I am making ugly things beautiful. What then? I don't quite understand you, North Wind. You tell me what then? Well, I will tell you. If you see me with my face all black, don't be frightened. If you see me with flapping wings like a bat, as big as the whole sky, don't be frightened. If you hear me ragging 10 times worse than Mrs. Bill, the blacksmith's wife, even if you see me looking at people's windows like Mrs. Eavesdropper, the gardener's wife, you must believe that I am doing my work. Nay, Diamond, if I change into a serpent or a tiger, you must not let go your hold of me, for my hand will never change in yours. If you keep a good hold, if you keep a hold, you will know who I am all the time, even when you look at me and can't see the least like the north wind. I may look something very awful, do you understand? Quite well, said Little Diamond. Come along then, said the North Wind, and disappeared behind the mountain of hay. Diamond crept out of the bed and followed her. Chapter 2. The Lawn. When Diamond got round the corner of hay, for a moment he hesitated. The stair by which he would naturally have gone down to the door was at the other side of the loft and looked very black indeed, for it was full of North Wind's hair as she descended before him, and just beside him was the ladder going straight down into the stable, up which his father always came to fetch the hay for Diamond's dinner. Through the opening in the door, the faint gleam of the stable lantern was enticing, and Diamond thought he would run down that way. The stair went close past the loose box in which Diamond the horse lived. When Diamond the boy was halfway down, he remembered that it was of no use to go this way, for the stable door was locked. But at the same moment there was a horse. Diamond's great head poked out of his box on to the ladder, for he knew Boy Diamond, although he was in his nightgown, and wanted him to pull his ears for him. This Diamond did very gently for a minute or so, and patted and stroked his neck too, and kissed the big horse, and had begun to take the bits of straw and hay out of his mane, when all at once he recollected that the Lady North Wind was waiting for him in the yard. Good night, Diamond, he said, and darted up the ladder, across the loft and down the stair to the door. But when he got out into the yard, there was no lady. Now, it was always a dreadful thing to think there is somebody and find nobody. Children, in particular, have not made up their minds to it. They generally cry at nobody, especially when they wake up at night. But it was an especial disappointment to Diamond, for his little heart had been beating with joy. The face of the North Wind was so grand. To have a lady like that for a friend, with such long hair too, why, it was longer than 20 diamonds' tails. She was gone, and there he stood, with his bare feet on the stones of the paved yard. It was clear night overhead, and the stars shining. Orion, in particular, was making the most of his bright belt and golden sword. But the moon was only a poor thin crescent. There was just one great jagged black and grey cloud in the sky, with a steep side to it like a precipice, and the moon was against this side, and looked as if she had tumbled off the top of the cloud hill and broken herself in rolling down the precipice. She did not seem comfortable, for she was looking down into the deep pit waiting for her. At least this was what Diamond thought, as he stood up for a moment staring at her. But he was quite wrong, for the moon was not afraid, and there was no pit she was going down into, for there were no sides to it, and a pit without sides to it is not a pit at all. Diamond, however, had not been out so late before in all his life, and things looked so strange about him, just as if he had got into fairyland, of which he knew quite as much as anybody, for his mother had no money to buy books to set him wrong on the subject. I've seen this world, only sometimes, just now and then, you know, look as strange as ever I saw fairyland, but I confess that I have not yet seen fairyland at its best. I am always going to see it sometime, But if you had been out in the face and not at the back of the north wind on a cold, rather frosty night, and in your own nightgown, you would have felt it all quite as strange as Diamond did. He cried a little, just a little. He was so disappointed to lose the lady, of course. You, little man, wouldn't have done that, but for my part, I don't mind people crying so much as I mind what they cry about, and how they cry. Whether they cry quietly like ladies and gentlemen, or go shrieking like vulgar emperors or ill-natured cooks, for all emperors are not gentlemen, and all cooks are not ladies, nor all queens and princesses for that matter either. But it can't be denied that little gentle crying does one good. It did Diamond good, for as soon as it was over, he was a brave boy again. "She shan't say it was my fault anyhow," said Diamond. "I dare say she is hiding somewhere to see what I will do. I will look for her." So he went round the end of the stable towards the kitchen garden, but the moment he was clear of the shelter of the stable, sharp as a knife came the wind against his little chest and his bare legs. Still, he would look in the kitchen garden and went on, but when he got round the weeping ash that stood in the corner, the wind blew much stronger, and it grew stronger and stronger, till he could hardly fight against it, and it was so cold. All the flashy spikes of the stars seemed to have got somehow into the wind. Then he thought of what the lady had said about people being cold because they were not with the north wind. How it was that he should have guessed that she meant at all that very moment, I cannot tell, but I have observed that the most wonderful thing in the world is how people come to understand anything. He turned his back to the wind and trotted again towards the yard, whereupon, strange to say, it blew so much more gently against his calves than it blew against his shins, that he began to feel almost warm by contrast. You must not think it was cowardly of Diamond to turn his back to the wind. He did so only because he thought Lady North Wind had said something like telling him to do so. If she had said to him that he must hold his face to it, Diamond would have held his face to it. But the most foolish thing is to fight for no good and to please nobody. Well, it was just as if the wind was pushing Diamond along. If he turned round, it grew very sharp on his legs especially, and so he thought the wind might really be Lady North Wind, though he could not see her, and he had better let her blow him wherever she pleased. So she blew, and he went and went, until he found himself standing at a door in a wall, which door led from the yard into a little belt of shrubbery flanking Mr. Coleman's house. Mr. Coleman was his father's master and the owner of Diamond. He opened the door and went through the shrubbery and out into the middle of the lawn, still hoping to find the north wind. The soft grass was very pleasant to his bare feet, and felt warm after the stones of the yard, but the lady was nowhere to be seen. Then he began to think that after all he must have done wrong. After all, he must have done wrong, and she was offended with him for not following close after her, but staying to talk to the horse, which certainly was neither wise nor polite. There he stood in the middle of the lawn, the wind blowing his nightgown till it flapped like a loose sail. The stars were very shiny overhead, but they did not give light enough to show that the grass was green, and Diamond stood alone in the strange night, which looked half solid all about him. He began to wonder whether this was a dream or not. It was important to determine this, for, thought Diamond, if I am in a dream, I am safe in my bed, and I needn't cry. But if I'm not in a dream, I'm out here, and perhaps I better cry, or at least I'm not sure whether I can help it. He came to the conclusion, however, that, whether he was in a dream or not, there could be no harm in not crying for a little while longer. He could begin whenever he liked. The back of Mr. Coleman's house was to the lawn, and one of the drawing-room windows looked out upon it. The ladies had not gone to bed, for the light was still shining in at the window, but they had no idea that the little boy was standing on the lawn in his nightgown, or they would have run out in a moment, and as long as he saw that light, Diamond could not feel quite lonely. He stood staring, not at the great warrior Orion in the sky, nor yet at the disconsolate, neglected moon going down in the west, but at the drawing room window with the light shining through its green curtains. He had been in that room once or twice that he could remember at Christmas times, for the Colemans were kind people, though they did not care much about children. All at once the light went nearly out. He could only see a glimmer of the shape of the window. Then, indeed, he felt that he was left alone. It was so dreadful to be out in the night after everybody was gone to bed. That was more than he could bear. He burst out crying in good earnest, beginning with a wail like that of the wind when it's waking up. Perhaps you think this is very foolish, for could he not go home to his own bed again when he liked? Yes, but it looked dreadful to him to creep up that stair again and lie down in his bed again, and know that the North Wind's window was open beside him, and she gone, and might never see her again. He would be just as lonely there as here. Nay, it would be much worse if he had to think that the window was nothing but a hole in the wall. But at the very moment when he burst out crying, the old nurse, who had grown to become one of the family, for she had not gone away when Miss Coleman did not want any more nursing, came to the back door, which was of glass, to close the shutters. She thought she heard a cry and peered out with a hand on each side of her eyes, like Diamond's blinkers. She saw something white on the lawn. Too old and too wise to be frightened, she opened the door and went straight towards the white thing to see what it was. And when Diamond saw her coming, he was not frightened either, though Mrs. Crump was a little cross sometimes, for there is a good kind of crossness that is only disagreeable, and there's a bad kind of crossness that is very nasty indeed. So she came up with her neck stretched out, and her head at the end of it, and her eyes foremost of all, like a snail's peering into the night to see what it could be that went on glimmering white before her. When she did see, she made a great exclamation and threw up her hands. Then, without a word, for she thought Diamond was walking in his sleep, she caught hold of him and led him towards the house. He made no objection, for he was just in the mood to be grateful for a notice of any sort, and Mrs. Crump led him straight into the drawing room. Now, from the neglected of the new housemaid, the fire in Miss Coleman's bedroom had gone out, and her mother had told her to brush her hair by the drawing room fire, a disorderly proceeding which mother's wish could justify. The young lady was very lovely, though not nearly so beautiful as the North Wind, and her hair was extremely long, for it came down to her knees, though it was nothing at all like North Wind's hair. Yet when she looked round, with her hair all about her, as Diamond entered, he thought for one moment that it was North Wind, and, pulling his hand from Mrs. Crump, he stretched out his arms and ran towards Miss Coleman. She was so pleased that she threw down her brush and almost knelt on the floor to receive him in her arms. He saw the next moment that she was not Lady North Wind, but she looked so like her, he could not help running into her arms and bursting into tears afresh. Mrs. Crump said the poor child had walked out in his sleep, and Diamond thought she ought to know, and did not contradict her. Thought she ought to know, and did not contradict her. For anything he knew, it might be so indeed. He let them talk on about him, and said nothing, and when after their astonishment was over, Miss Coleman had given him a sponge cake, it was decreed that Mrs. Crump should take him to his mother. He was quite satisfied. His mother had to get out of bed to open the door when Miss Crump knocked. She was indeed surprised to see her boy, and having taken him in her arms and carried him to his bed, returned and had a long confabulation with Miss Crump, for they were still talking when Diamond fell fast asleep and could hear them no longer. Chapter 3. Old Diamond. Diamond woke very early in the morning, and thought what a curious dream he had had. But the memory grew brighter and brighter in his head until it did not look altogether like a dream, and he began to doubt whether he had not really been abroad in the wind last night. He came to the conclusion that if he had really been brought home to his mother by Mrs. Crump, she would say something to him about it, and that would settle the matter. Then he got up and dressed himself, but finding that his father and mother were not yet stirring, he went down the ladder to the stable. There he found that even old Diamond was not yet awake, for he, as well as young Diamond, always got up in the moment he woke, and now he was lying as flat as a horse could lie upon his nice trim bed of straw. I'll give old Diamond a surprise, thought the boy, and creeping up very softly before the horse knew, he was astride of his back. Then it was young Diamond's turn to have more of a surprise than he had expected. For as was with an earthquake, with a rumbling and rocking hither and thither, a sprawling of legs and heaving as many backs, young Diamond found himself hoisted up into the air with both hands twisted in the horse's mane. The next instant, old Diamond lashed out with both his hind legs, and, giving one cry of terror, young Diamond found himself lying on his neck, with his arms as far round as they would go. But then the horse stood as still as stone, except that he lifted his head gently up, to let the boy slip down to his back. For when he heard young Diamond's cry, he knew that there was nothing to kick about, for young Diamond was a good boy, and old Diamond was a good horse, and the one was all right on the back of the other. As soon as Diamond had got himself comfortable on the saddle place, the horse began pulling at the hay, and the boy began thinking he had never mounted Diamond himself before, and he had never got off him without being lifted down, so he sat while the horse ate, wondering how he was to reach the ground. But while he meditated, his mother woke, and her first thought was to see her boy. She had visited him twice during the night, and found him sleeping quietly. Now his bed was empty, and she was frightened. "Diamond, Diamond, where are you, Diamond?" she called out. Diamond turned his head where he sat like a knight on his steed in enchanted stall, and cried aloud, "Here, mother." "Where, Diamond?" she returned. "Here, mother, on Diamond's back." She came running to the ladder, and peeping down, saw him aloft on the great horse. "Come down, Diamond," she said. "I can't," answered Diamond. "How did you get up there?" asked his mother. "Quite easily," answered he. "But when I got up, Diamond would get up too, and so here am I." His mother thought he had been walking in his sleep again, and hurried down the ladder. She did not much like going up to the horse, for she had not been used to horses, but she would have gone into a lion's den, not to say a horse's stall, to help her boy. So she went and lifted him off Diamond's back, and left braver all her life after. She carried him in her arms up to her room, but afraid of frightening him at his own sleepwalking, as she supposed it, said nothing about last night before the next day was over. Before the next day was over, Diamond had almost concluded the whole adventure a dream. For a week, his mother watched him very carefully, going into the loft several times at night, as often, in fact, as she woke. Every time she found him fast asleep. All that week it was hard weather. The grass showed white in the morning with the hoar frost, which clung like tiny comfits to every blade. And as Diamond's shoes were not good, and his mother had not quite saved up enough money to get him the new pair she so much wanted for him, she would not let him run out. He played all his games over and over indoors, especially that of driving two chairs harnessed by a baby cradle. And if they did not go very fast, they went as fast as he could be expected of the best chairs in the world, although one of them had only 3 legs, and the other only half a back. At length, his mother brought home his new shoes, and no sooner did she find they fitted him than she told him he might run out in the yard and amuse himself for an hour. The sun was going down when he flew from the door like a bird from its cage. All the world was anew to him. A great fire of sunset burned on the top of the gate that led from the stables to the house. Above the fire in the sky lay a large lake of green light above the golden cloud, and over that blue of the wintry heavens, and Diamond thought that, next to his own home, he had never seen any place he would like so much as to live in that sky city. For it's not fine things that make a home a nice place, but your mother and father. As he was yet looking at lovely colours, the gates were thrown open, and there was old Diamond and his friend in the carriage, dancing with impatience to get at their stalls and their oats. And in they came. Diamond was not in the least afraid of his father driving over him, but, careful not to spoil the grand show he made with his fine horses and his multitudinousness cape, with a red edge of every fold, he slipped out of the way and let him dash right on into the stables. To be quite safe, he had to step into the recess of the door that led from the yard to the shrubbery. As he stood there, he remembered how the wind had driven him to the same spot on the night of his dream, and once more he was almost sure that it was no dream. At all events, he would go in and see whether things looked at all now as they did then. He opened the door and passed through the little belt of shrubbery. Not a flower was to be seen in the beds on the lawn. Even the brave old chrysanthemums and Christmas roses had passed away before the frost. What? Yes, there was one. He ran and knelt down to look at it. It was a primrose, a dwarfish thing, but perfect in shape, a baby wonder. As he stooped his face to see it close, a little wind began to blow, and 2 or 3 long leaves that stood up behind the flower shook and waved and quivered. But the primrose lay still on the green hollow, looking up at the sky, and not seeming to know that the wind was blowing at all. It was just a one eye that the dull black wintry earth had opened to look at the sky. All at once, Diamond thought it was saying its prayers, and he thought not to be staring at it so. He ran to the stable to see his father make Diamond's bed. Then his father took him in his arms, carried him up the ladder, and set him down at the table, where they were going to have their tea. "Miss is very poorly," said Diamond's father. "Mrs. has been to the doctor with her today, and she looked very glum. When she came out again, I was a-watching of them to see what the doctor had said." "And didn't Miss look glum too?" asked his mother. "Not half as glum as the missus," returned the coachman. "You see," but he lowered his voice, and Diamond could not make out more than a word here or there, for Diamond's father was not only one of the finest of coachmen to look at, and one of the best drivers, but one of the most discreet of all servants as well. Therefore he did not talk about family affairs to anyone but his wife, whom he had proved better than himself long ago, and was careful that even Diamond should hear nothing he could repeat again concerning master and his family. It was bedtime soon, and Diamond went to bed and fell fast asleep. He awoke all at once in the dark. "Open the window, Diamond," said a voice. Now Diamond's mother had once more pasted up North Wind's window. "Are you North Wind?" said Diamond. "I don't hear you blowing." "No, but you hear me talking. Open the window, for I haven't over much time." "Yes," returned Diamond, "but please, North Wind, where's the use? You left me all alone last time." He had got up on his knees and was busy with his nails once more at the paper over the hole in the wall. For now that the North Wind spoke again, he remembered all that had taken place before as distinctly as if it had happened only last night. "Yes, but that was your fault," returned the North Wind. "I had work to do, and besides, a gentleman should never keep a lady waiting." "But I'm not a gentleman," said Diamond, scratching away at the paper. "I hope you won't say so 10 years after this." "I'm going to be a coachman, and a coachman is not a gentleman," persisted Diamond. "We call your father a gentleman in our house," said North Wind. "He doesn't call himself one," said Diamond. "That's of no consequence. Every man ought to be a gentleman, and your father is one." Diamond was so pleased to hear this that he scratched the paper like 10 mice, and, getting hold of the edge of it, tore it off. The next instant The young girl glided across the bed and stood upon the floor. "Oh dear," said Diamond, quite dismayed. "I didn't know. Who are you, please?" "I am North Wind." "Are you really?" "Yes, make haste." "But you're no bigger than me." "Do you think I care about how big or how little I am? Didn't you see me this evening? I was less then." "No, where was you?" "Behind the leaves of the primrose. Didn't you see them blowing?" "Yes." "Make haste, then, if you want to go with me." "But you are not big enough to take care of me. I think you are only a Miss North Wind." "I am big enough to show you the way, anyhow. But if you won't come, why, you must stay. I must dress myself. I didn't mind with a grown lady, but I couldn't go with a little girl in my nightgown." "Very well. I'm not in such a hurry as I was the other night. Dress as fast as you can, and I'll go and shake the primrose leaves till you come." "Don't hurt it," said Diamond. North Wind broke out in a little laugh like breaking of silver bubbles, and was gone in a moment. Diamond saw, for it was a starlit night, and the mass of hay was at low ebb, now the gleam of something vanishing down the stair, and springing out of bed, dressed himself as fast as he ever could. Then he crept out into the yard, through the door in the wall, and away to the primrose. Behind it stood North Wind, leaning over it and looking at the flower as if she had been its mother. "Come along," she said, jumping up and holding out her hand. Diamond took her hand. It was cold, but was pleasant and full of life. It was better than warm. She led him across the garden. With one bound, she was on top of the wall. Diamond was left at the foot. "Stop, stop," he cried. "Please, I can't jump like that." "You don't try," said North Wind, who, from the top, looked down a foot taller than before. "Give me your hand again, and I will try," said Diamond. She reached down. Diamond laid hold of her hand, gave a great spring, and stood beside her. "This is nice," he said. Another bound, and they stood in the road by the river. It was full tide, and the stars were shining clear in its depths, for it lay still, waiting for the turn to run down again to sea. They walked along its side. But they had not walked far before its surface was covered with ripples, and the stars had vanished from its bosom. The North Wind was now tall as a full-grown girl. Her hair was flying about her head, and the wind was blowing a breeze down the river. But she turned aside and went up the narrow lane, and as she went her hair fell down around her. "I have some rather disagreeable work to do tonight," she said, "before I get out to sea, and I must set about it at once. The disagreeable work must be looked after first." So saying, she laid hold of Diamond and began to run, gliding along faster and faster. Diamond kept up with her as well as he could. She made many turnings and windings, apparently because it was not quite easy to get him over walls and houses. Once they ran through a hall where they found back and front doors open. At the foot of the stair, North Wind stood still, and Diamond, hearing a great growl, started in terror, and there, instead of the North Wind, was a huge wolf by his side. He let go his hold in dismay, and the wolf bounded up the stair. The windows of the house rattled and shook as if guns were firing, and the sound of a great fall came from above. Diamond stood with white face, staring up at the landing. Surely, he thought, North Wind can't be eating one of the children. Coming to himself all at once, he rushed after her with his little fist clenched. There were ladies in long trains going up and down the stairs, and gentlemen in white neckties attending on them, who stared at him, but none of them were of the people of the house, and they said nothing. Before he reached the head of the stair, however, the North Wind met him, took him by the hand, and hurried down and out of the house. "I hope you haven't eaten a baby, North Wind," said Diamond very solemnly. North Wind laughed merrily, and went tripping on faster. Her grassy robe swept and swirled about her steps, and wherever it passed over withered leaves, they went fleeing and whirling in spirals and running on their edges like wheels all about her feet. "No," she said at last, "I did not eat a baby. You would not have had to ask that foolish question if you had not let go of your hold of me. You would have seen how I served nurse. that was calling a child bad names and telling her that she was wicked. She had been drinking. I was an ugly gin bottle in a cupboard. And you frightened her? Said Diamond. I believe so, answered the North Wind, laughing merrily. I flew at her throat, and she tumbled over on the floor with such a crash that they ran in. She'll be turned away tomorrow, and quite time, if they knew as much as I do. But then you frightened the little one. She never saw me. The woman would not have seen me either if she had not been wicked. Oh, said Diamond dubiously. Why should you see things, returned the North Wind, that you wouldn't understand or know what to do with? Good people see good things, bad people see bad things. Then you are a bad thing. No, for you see me, Diamond, dear, said the girl, and she looked down at him, and Diamond saw the loving eyes of the great lady beaming with the depths of her falling hair. I had to make myself look like a bad thing before she could see me. If I had put on any other shape than a wolf, she would not have seen me, for that's what is growing to be her own shape inside of her. I don't know what you mean, said Diamond, but I suppose it's all right. They were now climbing to the slope of the grassy ascent. It was Primrose Hill. In fact, although Diamond had never heard of it, the moment they reached the top, the North Wind stood and turned her face towards London. The stars were still shining clear and cold overhead. There was not a cloud to be seen. The air was sharp, but Diamond did not find it cold. Now, said the lady, whatever you do, do not let my hand go. I might have lost you last time, only I was not in a hurry then. Now I am in a hurry. Yet she stood still for a moment. And with that, my lovelies, that is where we end for the evening. Not a bad little story, huh? I am so grateful to my friend Mary Jane who sent this book to me because it reminds me very much of a very personal story of my own, which perhaps I will tell you. I will tell you a little story. I will tell you a little personal story that reminds me very much of the North Wind. So prior to my birth, my mother was bleeding internally. She was swelling. She swelled up like she was having triplets with me. And the only thing that would ease her nausea was bowls of oranges, fresh cut oranges, by her bed. And the doctors had warned her that perhaps she ought to seek an abortion. And she thought that she might have to pray over it. And so she was ill, and she had been home. She was in bed, and in walked this woman in her room, and this woman had long dark hair and a flowing red dress. And the woman said, his face, his face, his face, his face. And my mother says, what's wrong with his face? She says, his face. The woman said, my mother said, but is he deformed? Is he ugly? And the woman said, the Spirit of the Lord is all over him. And my mother went, oh, she was so thankful that this had happened. And she thought, who is this woman in my room? And she opened her eyes, and the woman was gone. Then, when I was but a child myself, many years later, I was walking along. My mother had forgotten to pick me up from school, and I decided that I would walk down the lonely mile road to the home by the river in the wood. And I began to psych myself out, as the case were, and I began to think of lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, I thought about being devoured by wolves, and I grew very afraid. And then as I reached the point where I began to cry because there was no one, I heard this voice in my head, this soft, sweet voice that said, take me by the hand and don't look to the left or the right, but hold my hand and I will lead you home. So I walked home with my hand in the air like this, and my mother, seeing me, was startled that I had walked home. She had forgotten the time. And she says, but sweetheart, why were you walking with your hand in the air? And I told her the story. Now, she, of course, being a Christian, thought that it was a Christian thing. I see I've lost quite a few over on my Facebook. It's very strange. There's only one person here who is watching now, but I still have 9 over here on my YouTube. That's a very strange thing, but that's quite all right. At any rate, my lovelies, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Thank you for all of your votes on the Face of Horror. I again will put it in. I'll pin it to the comment section in YouTube, and I'll put it here on this one. You can vote every single day. Your votes mean everything to me. I know it's kind of a long shot, but it's there is. I'm going to tell you one more personal story. So there is. I'm not a Christian, but there is a motto that I do ascribe to, and it's I don't know. I think it's in Ecclesiastes, but it says, whatsoever your hands find to do, do it with your might. So that means don't half-ass it. Do it as well as you can. Whatever your hands find to do it. So that's what even though it's a long shot, I am giving it my all with this competition. And those of you who have been voting for me, it means so much to me. I cannot thank you enough. It's a long shot, but I am so grateful that we are here together and that you have considered me so much. With that, my lovelies, both on Facebook, both on YouTube, I so appreciate you. There goes my clock. Good evening, good morning if you're watching me in the future, and good night. With that, much love always. Take care. Bye-bye.